Boy, do we have a lot to talk about in chapter 23 of the book of Ezekiel today. So, this chapter is a powerful metaphor. He's going to use the concept of sisters, so the perspective of women, to help us understand some of the challenges that are happening in Israel. Now, realize this isn't making it sound like women are bad or evil. This is saying that there are challenges and problems, and to understand the truth, we need to understand women's perspectives. So, really, a kind of a change, a reversal here that we have. And so, we're going to see some interesting lessons from this. Now, one thing I want to point out right at the beginning of this chapter is when we look at can think of the Joseph Smith translation. So, Joseph Smith, who's the original prophet and founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he went through the Bible using his prophetic gift of translations that he used to do the Book of Mormon, and went through the Bible to correct some things and update some things. And it's interesting, in the book of Ezekiel, there were 5 changes that Joseph Smith made. Not like major changes, but 5 things that he adjusted in the book of Ezekiel. 3 of them are in this chapter. So there's a lot to think about in this chapter. In fact, Monty S. Nyman, in his article, The Contribution of the JST to Understanding Old Testament Prophets, said, in chapter 23 of Ezekiel, the Lord uses an allegory to teach that Samaria and Jerusalem, the capital cities of the 2 nations of Israel, had alienated themselves from the Lord by committing whoredoms or worshiping other gods. The King James Version represents this alienation as being in their minds and from their symbolic lovers. They're the other nations, basically. Joseph Smith made changes in verses 17, 22, and 28, showing that the nations of Israel were alienated in their minds from the Lord by these symbolic lovers. These changes made the verses consistent with the rest of the allegory. So what Joseph Smith did was basically help us understand this allegory better than what we had in just the King James Version, is what it is. So we'll see those, we get into those verses, what he adjusted. So when we look here at this chapter as well, in Bible commentary from, I believe this was from Clark, he said, the idolatries and foreign alliances of Jerusalem and Samaria are here described under the same strong figure, which is used in chapter 16 as well. Oholah, which is Samaria, and Oholibah, Jerusalem, were 2 sisters, both seduced in Egypt in their youth, both espoused by God, and both unfaithful to him. Samaria took as her lovers first the Assyrians and then the Egyptians, and was at length slain by the former. Jerusalem, not warned by her sister's fate, made first the Assyrians and then the Babylonians her paramours. Being alienated from the latter, she has turned to her early lovers of Egypt, but she will be destroyed like her sister by the lovers whom she has just forsaken. The sin and judgment of the 2 sisters are described afresh. So fascinating stuff we're going to go over today. So let's jump in here in verse 1. The word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, so this is another revelation. So if you want to wonder if does continuing revelation have a principle in the Old Testament, yeah, we're seeing more revelation. We're seeing more things happen. This is a principle that bears its weight out in the scriptures. The continuing revelation is how God does things. Verse 2, Son of man, there were 2 women, the daughters of one mother. So these are sisters. And they committed whoredoms in Egypt. They committed whoredoms in their youth. There were their breasts pressed. There they bruised the teats of their virginity. So Kent Jackson had a comment in his The Marriage of Hosea and Jehovah's Covenant with Israel. He said, here the 2 kingdoms, Israel and Judah, are characterized as 2 sisters who were immoral before Jehovah found them in Egypt, and who failed to change their ways after he married them. The elder sister Israel lusted after the Assyrians, whose splendor and virility she could not resist, and gave herself to them just as she had to the Egyptians when she was younger. That's what they're talking about here. So these are like 2 sisters. They went off into Egypt. So they're from Israel, But they went off to Egypt to live and do things, and they ended up basically being immoral with people in Egypt. And then they come back, and then they get married, and they're supposed to be celibate during the engagement time, and then they have this husband that they will marry and be married to him. And so you could say this is a polygamous relationship because one man, two women. But then, while they're betrothed to this man who's God, they go off with other men that they think are mightier and better. And that's so the older sister goes off with Assyria and commits adultery basically with Assyria, I should say, and then the younger sister, and then she gets destroyed by Assyria, and then the younger sister does this with Babylon later on, basically. So let's go into this. Verse 4, and the names of them were Oholah, which means a tent, the elder, and Oholibah, her sister, which means my tent is in her. And they were mine, and they bare sons and daughters. Thus were their names Samaria is Oholah, and Jerusalem, Oholibah. So tents or tabernacles. The northern kingdom tent was never accepted by God. The southern kingdom had the tabernacle of God basis. Remember, Jerusalem is where the tabernacle of God was. It was accepted of God. Samaria, the northern kingdom, was never accepted. Why was it never accepted? This goes back to the sons of Solomon, Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Remember, Rehoboam was the appointed king after King Solomon, and Jeroboam said, I want to be king too. And he got mad and prideful, and so he left Jerusalem to try to do his own kingdom, and he brought most of the tribes out with him. So like 10 of the 12 tribes followed Jeroboam. So the public didn't follow Rehoboam, they followed Jeroboam, but Rehoboam was appointed to be king in Jerusalem. The problem that Jeroboam had was in order to worship God, in order to fulfill their religious duties, they had to go back into Jerusalem to worship. And so he said, this isn't going to work because if they go back into Jerusalem, my brother will convince them to move back into Jerusalem and stay there. So he'll have an opportunity to propagandize them and convince them to come back. I can't have that because if they go back, I lose my power. So he instituted idolatry. He put altars at the mountaintops all around them so that they would worship God through idolatrous practices. And that's the northern kingdom, basically. So the southern kingdom stayed worshiping the God the proper way. The northern kingdom pretty quickly worshiped God the wrong way and fell away from God and started dealing with other religions and other things, and that's that spiritual adultery that this is metaphorically talking about, basically. So verse 5, and Oholah played the harlot when she was mine. She doted on her lovers, on the Assyrians, her neighbors, which were clothed with blue, captains and rulers, all of them desirable young men, horsemen riding upon horses. So she's going, oh my gosh, the Assyrians are hot. Those guys are buff, they're strong, they're mighty, they're wealthy, they have power and influence. I want to go hang out with them. So even though I'm married, I'm going to step out on my husband and go hang out with them. And so she does. Verse 7, thus she committed her whoredoms with them, with all them that were chosen, men of Assyria, and with all on whom she doted, with all their idols she defiled herself. So this is idolatry. Now when we look at this, this is again talking about the idolatry that she is experiencing, basically. Verse 8, neither left she her whoredoms brought from Egypt. So she still is doing what she did in Egypt, basically. So for in her youth they lay with her, and they bruised the breast of her virginity, and poured their whoredom upon her. So Egypt corrupted her, basically, and now she is doing the same with Assyria. Verse 9, wherefore I have delivered her into the hand of her lovers, into the hand of the Assyrians, upon whom she doted. These discovered her nakedness. They took her sons and her daughters, and slew her with the sword. She became famous among women, for they had executed judgment upon her. So she went to be with the Assyrians, and the Assyrians loved her up, and then when she was no longer valuable, they killed her. Basically, that's the Assyrians coming down during the time of Isaiah to destroy Judah. They took them and scattered Israel, the northern kingdoms, all over the place. Now, verse 11, when her sister Oholibah saw this, she was more corrupt in her inordinate love than she. So the younger sister watched what her older sister did and then one-upped her, basically did it worse. And in her whoredoms more than her sister in her whoredoms. She doted upon the Assyrians, her neighbors, captains and rulers, clothed most gorgeously, horsemen riding upon horses, all of them desirable young men. Then I saw that she was defiled, that they took both one way. So she committed whoredoms with the Assyrians too. Verse 14, and that she increased her whoredoms, for when she saw men portrayed upon the wall, the images of the Chaldeans, portrayed with vermilion, girded with girdles upon their loins, exceeding in dyed attire upon their heads, all of them princes to look to after the manner of the Babylonians of Chaldea, the land of their nativity. So again, she's committing whoredoms with Assyria, but then she catches the eye of the Babylonians. And the Chaldeans is another way to think about them. That's kind of a precursor to Babylon. Like verse 16, as soon as she saw them with her eyes, she doted upon them and sent messengers unto them in Chaldea. And the Babylonians came to her in the bed of love, and they defiled her with their whoredom, and she was polluted with them, and her mind was alienated from them. So she discovered her whoredoms and discovered her nakedness. Then my mind was alienated from her, like as my mind was alienated from her sister. Now, when we look at this, I want to jump back to verse 17 for a second here. So she's now had three. Her older sister had two lovers. She's have three lovers as well. So in verse 17 is one of the times that Joseph Smith translation comes in. Right at the end, her mind was alienated from them. He changed that one to say her mind was alienated from me by them. So they became alienated from God because the lovers, the religion of their lovers is what blinded them, basically. Let's see, verse 19. Yet she multiplied her whoredoms in calling to remembrance the days of her youth, wherein she had played the harlot in the land of Egypt. For she doted upon her paramours, whose flesh is as the flesh of asses, and whose issue is like the issue of horses. Thus thou callest to remembrance the lewdness of thy youth in bruising thy teats by the Egyptians for the paps of thy youth. So this is just, again, talking about she's had three lovers. Her older sister had two lovers, basically, and remembering all the things that she had done in the past. So verse 22, therefore, O Oholibah, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will raise up thy lovers against thee, from whom thy mind is alienated. Now, this is where Joseph Smith makes a change, by whom thy mind is alienated from me, and I will bring them against thee on every side. So it's that the punishment is because they left God. They were unfaithful to their husband, basically, to God. And that's the punishment. And so the lovers are going to now come upon them and destroy them. So verse 23, the Babylonians and all the Chaldeans, Pekod and Shoa and Koa, and all the Assyrians with them, all of them desirable young men, captains and rulers, great lords and renowned, all of them riding upon horses, and they shall come against thee with chariots, wagons, and wheels, and with an assembly of people, which shall set against thee buckler and shield and helmet round about. And I will set judgment before them, and they shall judge thee according to their judgments. So again, talking about Babylon sieging Jerusalem. Verse 25, I will set my jealousy against thee, and they shall deal furiously with thee. They shall take away thy nose and thine ears, and thy remnant shall fall by the sword. They shall take thy sons and thy daughters, and thy residue shall be devoured by the fire. So lots of killings, lots of destruction, lots of losing sons and daughters, so a lot of inheritance, a lot of descendants destroyed, so lack of continuation of families. The residue will be devoured by fire. The city was set on fire. as well. They shall fall by the sword. Take away thy nose and thine ears. This could be talking about shaming them. Basically, like they just take a sword or a knife and they cut your ears off, cut your nose off, so they take away your beauty. They take away the. No one's going to look at you and go, "Oh, you're a beautiful woman, Jerusalem." They're going to go, "Holy crap, you are ugly. You have been tortured and beaten." Basically, is what's that this symbology. I don't know if that literally happened. They literally cut off some of the people's noses and ears, but they didn't kill them, but made them scarred for life, basically. Now, verse 26, they shall also strip thee out of thy clothes and take away thy fair jewels. Thus will I make thy lewdness to cease from thee, and thy whoredom brought from the land of Egypt, so that thou shalt not lift up thine eyes unto them, nor remember Egypt any more. So remember, Jerusalem, after Babylon had come down and occupied the area, tried to build an alliance with Egypt. So that's this idea of remembering her past lovers, and Egypt ended up bailing on them and just couldn't win against Babylon. And so to save themselves, they left, and Babylon takes out Jerusalem. So verse, let's see, 28, for thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will deliver thee into the hand of them whom thou hatest, into the hand of them from whom thy mind is alienated. And they shall deal with thee hatefully, and shall take away all thy labor, and shall leave thee naked and bare, and the nakedness of thy whoredom shall be discovered, both thy lewdness and thy whoredoms. So this was a common thing. If a man found his wife was guilty of adultery, sometimes what would happen is that man would take his wife to the town square and basically forcibly take her clothes off of her in front of everybody and go, "This is the sign, here's my wife's nakedness. Several of you have exposed her nakedness too. I'm exposing her as sinful, and this is why I'm divorcing her and kicking her out." So now nobody will want to do anything with her. This is really bad for a woman because you're kicked in a way out of society. You're not seen as valued anymore. So this woman will probably end up being homeless and having to travel to other lands or do something else because she won't be accepted anymore in this society. It would be bad for any other man to take this woman who has been known to be an adulterer and bring and be with her, because that would degrade him. As soon as they found out he is sleeping with this adulteress woman, his status would be brought down as well. So not a good situation to be in. So that's kind of what this is happening, is letting the rest of the world know Jerusalem is being exposed. Jerusalem is not doing what they should. And so we hear sometimes these stories of even the heathen people, the non-Israelites traveling by going, "That was that great Jerusalem place, man. They are destroyed. They're gone. They should have worshiped their real God." And so that's where some of those stories would come from. Now let's see. We are in verse 30. I will do these things unto thee because thou hast gone a whoring after the heathen, and because thou art polluted with their idols. Thou hast walked in the way of thy sister, therefore will I give her cup into thine hand. So remember the cup of the wrath of God? Her sister had it, now it goes into the little sister's hand because she's been even worse. Thou hast walked, let's see, verse 32, thus saith the Lord God, thou shalt drink of thy sister's cup deep and large. Thou shalt be laughed to scorn and had in derision. It containeth much. This is not a small cup. This is a big cup, which means a lot of destruction and problems for Jerusalem. Verse 33, thou shalt be filled with drunkenness and sorrow, with the cup of astonishment and desolation, with the cup of thy sister Samaria. Thou shalt even drink it and suck it out. So this isn't just drink it. This is like every last drop. You're going to lick that bowl clean or that cup. You're going to sip the last drops out of it, basically. You're not going to get away with not doing this, basically. Thou shalt thou shalt break the sherds thereof and pluck off thine own breasts, for I have spoken it, saith the Lord God. Now that one sounds harsh. This is basically, so the cup will be broken, and kind of using the pot sherd, so the sharp edges, cut her breasts off. So this is definitely not literal. This is more basically realizing Jerusalem and the people are going to lose the ability to nurture themselves, to take care of themselves, and to help with their children as well. A lot of destruction is coming. The descendancy is going to be severely, the gene pool for Judah is going to diminish drastically. Most of them are actually already exiled into Babylon, in that first group that Ezekiel and Daniel were in. Let's see, verse 35, therefore thus saith the Lord God, because thou hast forgotten me and hast cast me behind thy back, therefore bear thou also thy lewdness and thy whoredoms. The Lord said moreover unto me, so this is another one, verse 36, Son of man, wilt thou judge Oholah and Oholibah? Yea, declare unto them their abominations. So this is that continuation of what we had in the last chapter too. That they have committed adultery, and blood is in their hands. With their idols have they committed adultery, and have also caused their sons, whom they bear unto me, to pass for them through the fire to devour them. That's the fires of Molech. We've talked about that many times in the past. Moreover, this they have done unto me. They have defiled my sanctuary in the same day, and have profaned my Sabbaths. So this is like a prophecy that could be... it sounds really similar to chapter 22. This could be another prophecy of just replicating what was in chapter 22 again. It might be a way to think about this second part here in chapter 23. Verse 39, for when they had slain their children to their idols, when they came the same day into my sanctuary to profane it, and lo, thus have they done in the midst of my house. So even the temple has been defiled. They're not worshiping properly in the temple. They're using it for other things. Verse 40, and furthermore, that ye have sent for men to come from far, unto whom a messenger was sent, and lo, they came, for whom thou didst wash thyself, paintest thy eyes, and deckest thyself with ornaments. So this is the idea of this Jerusalem being a female persona, wanting to encourage men from outside of her area to come to her. So she's beautifying herself, making herself pretty for them. And verse 41, and sattest upon a stately bed, and a table prepared before it, whereupon thou hast set mine incense and mine oil. So she's using the Lord's sacred things for her own gain. Verse 42, and a voice of a multitude being at ease was with her, and with the men of the common sort were brought Sabians from the wilderness, which put bracelets upon their hands and beautiful crowns upon their heads. So this is talking about, if you look at the footnote, Sabians talking about drunkards, people from just kind of wandering in the wilderness, homeless people. You could probably think about it that way. And verse 43, and said I unto her, that was old in adulteries, will they now commit whoredoms with her, and she with them? Yet they went in unto her as they go in unto a woman that playeth a harlot. So went they in unto Oholah and Oholibah, the lewd women. And the righteous men, they shall judge them after the manner of adulteresses, and after the manner of women that shed blood, because they are adulteresses, and blood is in their hands. So they could be killing some of these men that they're sleeping with. They could be, luring them in, basically, and using that as a way to get at them, or just this idea of destroying these men, basically, by seducing them in. Verse 46, for thus saith the Lord God, I will bring up a company upon them, and will give them to be removed and spoiled. And the company shall stone them with stones, and dispatch them with their swords. They shall slay their sons and their daughters, then burn up their houses with fire. This is going to be one doozy of a situation that they're facing, basically. So, let's see. Verse 48, thus will I cause the lewdness to cease out of the land, that all women may be taught not to do after your lewdness, and they shall recompense your lewdness upon you, and ye shall bear the sins of your idols, and ye shall know that I am the Lord God. So a lot of problems that are going to happen to them. This is quite a powerful metaphor for this idea of Israel, the northern kingdom, and Judah and Jerusalem in the southern kingdom being destroyed. And for why were they destroyed, basically. So really interesting metaphor. Ladies, I'm kind of curious to hear, what does, you know, when you think of this metaphor of young women who have kind of gone the wrong way in their youth, and then they got married, and then they went away from their husband and things, what does this mean to you? What do you learn from this idea? What are the things that this would mean from a woman's perspective, uh, to think about these concepts? And how does that help you understand this idea of covenants and relationships with God in this way? I think there's some insight that you ladies have from your perspective to read this story and think about it from your own perspective of being a woman. What does this mean? What is the implications? What could go on with this? And how does it help me understand this idea of keeping covenants with God and being married to Him, basically? So I look forward to reading your comments on that, on this chapter, and we'll see you also in the next chapter.